Welcome to the Dr. Berkson's Best Health Radio Show. We have got an exciting show for you today. I love biographers, stories of other people's lives that help give you tools in your lives. And this is all about a book called Unstoppable by an amazing biographer that is going to just make you feel like you have better tools to come out of the pandemic and soar rather than be less than. You know, hope is so important. I remember that line in Shawshank Redemption where Red said, without hope, a man really can't move forward. So this show really is going to give you a larger font size of hope. So hold on. You know the world is in a bit of a mess. Of course, life on this planet, this ball of life and chaos, the third planet from the sun, has always been a chaotic entanglement of grace, grit, and trauma. It always boggles my mind when on dating sites, men and women both say they're looking for a mate that's low maintenance and no drama. But if you occupy a bodysuit, you've got, praise be to the universe, you've got drama. But how do you face your dramas and your demons and the pandemic and the entanglement of all, we don't know who to believe anymore? How do you face all that and come out really, truly on the other side better? Because this is your life, and that's all that you can do right now is be the best that you can do if you want to enjoy the moments that God's graced you with. So how do you do this without killing yourself before your time? This show is the amazing story of how to succeed after life-changing setbacks. So we have on the show today an author who's made his life, God bless him, telling the unique stories of other human beings that hold promise and tools and hope for each of us. This new book, which I really think everybody should go out and get, and in the show notes, we'll have the links at the bottom of the show notes. It's called, and I love this term, I really love this term, I think about this term a lot. The name of the book is called Unstoppable. And it's Siggi B. Wilzig, and I'm sure I can't pronounce that right, so we're going to let Joshua do that. The Astonishing Journey from Auschwitz Survivor and Penniless Immigrant to Wall Street Legend. So this is a historic document that's a captivating story that gives us tools for you. So welcome to the show, Joshua.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So Joshua, how did you come about writing this book? And then we're going to want to hear the major messages, of course, from this book. And thank you for giving us this story and being on the show today.
No, my pleasure. Like a lot of life's best surprises, it started with the phone ringing one day about 8 years ago. And on the other end of the line was Siggi Wilzig's son. I didn't know it at the time. Ivan said, Professor Greene, I've read some of your other books and I really like your biographies of Holocaust survivors. You should write my father's story. So he told me a little bit about his father, and I had to stop him and said, look, Ivan, thank you for all of your kind words, but I'm really done with the darkness. I just want to write about the light now. My last book was a biography of the late Beatle George Harrison, and that was just joy. And that's kind of the direction I've taken. And he said, no, you don't understand. He interrupted me and said, my father was the light. He was a beacon of hope for every immigrant who ever came to America. And he went on and on. And I did some research and found out that he really wasn't exaggerating. Siggi Wilzig was an amazing human being who came out of the darkest of dark times, arrived here with nothing, an elementary school education and no money. And by the time he was done, he had built an oil and banking empire with more than $4 billion in assets, and had become one of the most active voices for Holocaust memory in the history of the country. So I thought that was a story worth telling.
So how did he go about doing that? That's what, people are sitting in their homes and they're going, oh, I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to believe. I don't know if I should get the vaccine. I made less money than I had before, or I saved a few rupees and I'm not sure what to do with them. So I have, a building background of support. So what were the steps that helped him go from darkness to light?
Dr. Lindsay, it's a strange thing. We humans seem to make our greatest strides under duress. When things are too comfortable, there's no real impetus for change. So Siggi had this extraordinarily, I guess you'd call them self-reflective skills, where he was able to examine himself and recognize what strengths he had, where his weaknesses were, and engage everything toward a noble end. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, I want to know that because he came in. It's like my grandfather, Kent, took me back. Kent's a Mormon who I love that lived next door for many years. And he went back into my ancestry since they have such great tools to do that. And he showed the writing where my grandfather only had $14 in his pocket. And you're saying that that's the same thing. He had no money in his pocket. What were the steps that, I can't wait to hear that.
Well, the story that comes instantly to mind that speaks to his, you might say, resilience or self-preservation skills was during the death march from Auschwitz in January of 1945. The operators of Camp Auschwitz heard the Russian army approaching from the east, and so they marched whatever remaining prisoners were still alive out of Poland into camps farther inside Nazi Germany. When they bedded down for the night, it was freezing cold. It was a blizzard, and they had nothing but threads to wear for clothing. Siggi had only one possession on him, and that was a spoon that he had brought with him from his barrack in the camp. And on the edge of the spoon with a stone, he had managed to sharpen it somewhat so he could use it for cutting things. And he looked around when the guards were asleep and saw that there was a little sapling, a birch tree. He crawled over to that tree and using the edge of his spoon, scored little strips of bark, warmed them up between his palms, braided them together, and used them to hold his shoes on. In the cold and snow, the shoelaces had deteriorated, and without shoes, he would catch gangrene and die. His body had no resources to fight that kind of an infection. So where this idea came from, he said later, it must have been the hand of God. He said, it certainly wasn't that I was some brilliant genius that I came up with these ideas, but a thread of bark literally saved his life. And I think if he were here today, that's what he would want your viewers, your listeners to know, that if you don't give in to the despair, the universe is beneficent. It's actually looking to help. And if you give it an opening, if there's an invitation there for those outside forces to come and be of aid, they will. And he was like that. He was always open to possibilities, even when things seemed absolutely hopeless and bleak.
So when he first came over here to the United States, what were the steps that led him to get $4 billion? And at that time, of course, $1 billion was worth a lot more than $1 billion today. I work hard. I don't have $1 billion of what it's valued today in my bank.
Today, what can you do with $1 billion? Nothing. He was 21 years old and 88 pounds at liberation. He was liberated by the American Army from concentration camp Mauthausen, spent the next 2 years working as a Nazi hunter as a way of thanks to his liberators. He worked in the counterintelligence corps. When he came to America, he had $240 in his pocket that he'd managed to save up. Didn't have any contacts, no business associates, no one sponsoring him, anything like that. But he made 3 vows. He said, I'm never going to go hungry again. He said, I'm going to have children and raise a good Jewish family and support the Jewish people. And whenever I see injustice, I'm going to speak up. He had a way when he was building business of convincing people to give him a try. He started, by the way, cleaning toilets in sweatshops.
That's what my grandmother did when she came from Russia. Exactly the same thing. Yeah.
For someone who would become a billionaire, rather humble origins, shoveling snow and cleaning toilets. When he saw an opportunity and he felt some resistance, maybe he was in a business meeting and he felt that anti-Semitic vibe in the air or something, he would roll his sleeve up and point to the prisoner number that had tattooed on his arm by the Nazis and said, the last person to try to intimidate me was Hitler. He didn't succeed, and neither will you. And then he put on his jacket and walk out of the room and generally beat them at their own game. So he was someone who never let bullies intimidate him. In fact, he would tell when he was speaking to high school groups or college groups, he would often say, bullies are just cowards pretending to be otherwise. Never let them stare you down.
What a message that is for today, because our kids are being bullied in school or on Facebook, or, in politics. Sometimes politicians are bullied so they don't want to speak their mind, or otherwise they'll lose their votes. So this is an important message that's very valid for today.
It is. And, his life, once he came here and saw that, in his words, the Almighty had spared him for a reason, to tell the story, to perpetuate Holocaust memory, and also to encourage particularly young people. His message was, don't think that this doesn't concern you because you're not Jewish, perhaps because you're African American or you're Catholic or you're Hispanic, whatever you may be. If you have any kind of connection to an immigrant background, this story is for you. You may recall on January 6th, the footage of that man storming the Capitol building with a sweatshirt that had Camp Auschwitz printed on it and the death head insignia below that.
Yes.
Racism and anti-Semitism didn't die with Hitler in his bunker in Berlin.
Right.
They're at the heart of the hatred and the violence and the bitterness that we're seeing around us today. So he would have wanted everyone to remain vigilant. And part of that is knowing history. He lamented how little people understand history and how important it is to know where we came from in order to know how to move forward most effectively.
Really knowing the future, or preserving the future, or protecting the future comes a lot from understanding the messages from the past. The thing that really gets me is that what I hear you say is, here he was, a prisoner of war. Here he was with no money. Here he was rebuilding himself, but he didn't hold on to anger. What we see today in the United States, and perhaps globally, is this trigger anger, this sense of such anger for what's been. How do we transmute that anger? Because anger doesn't serve to rebuild the future. It serves to Velcro us to the past. So how did he transmute anger from his roots?
Well, let me answer you in a somewhat broader context. In my family, I'm the one that everybody says is the spiritual guy. I've been practicing yoga for 30 some odd years.
Oh, no wonder we get along so well.
I'm vegan, believe in a cruelty-free diet. Practice meditation every morning. I have my prayer beads and I chant mantras. And I've been teaching mindfulness in the workplace for a number of years at Hofstra University. And I think the answer to your question in part is a daily regimen, something that you do every day that puts you in touch with your deeper, more noble self. And for each person, it may be different. Somebody will listen to music and feel that inner peace. Someone will, Siggi, for example, loved to wander through flower gardens. He said after having seen the ugliness and the despair of the concentration camps, for him, there was relief and restorative energy walking through. For example, the Biltmore Hotel in Phoenix has 39 acres of sculpted flower gardens. And he used to love going out there when there was a business meeting that called him to that part of the country.
I just have to tell you, so my grandmother's sister, they came here and they were here visiting, and their whole family was all murdered, the 12 other children and parents in Russia. So my grandmother, who only spoke Russian, had to start cleaning toilets and be a cleaning lady. Then she went back to school that you could get for people who are older, and she graduated high school exactly when I did. But it's funny, her sister ended up marrying a gentleman in Milwaukee that was had many cleaning stores, and they ended up buying one of those Biltmore homes that was on that property. And so I would go visit the rich side of the family when I was a kid and wander through those same flower gardens.
Okay, so lots of nice connections here. Yeah, go expose yourself to art. Don't deny yourself the company of beauty, and it can be something as simple as a stroll through a flower garden. It can be listening to beautiful music. I've been reacquainting myself with opera lately. And there's something so moving, so beautiful listening to the tenors singing Nessun Dorma, or I love Pavarotti and Maria Callas. I think we need that. We can get away with very little food. We can get away without a lot of life's comforts. I don't know how long we can survive without beauty. I don't know how long we can survive without doing something to get in touch with our souls, with our deeper selves. And for me, it's in the yoga and in the chanting of mantras. For Siggi, it was those flower gardens. For each of us, it may be different, but our humanness is fragile. And it's resilience, it's robust, but it's not invulnerable. And it requires nourishment. So a little something every day is a good idea.
I do appreciate the recent studies over the last 2 years that suggest that being in greenery is so supportive for health and resilience. But now they've shown that if you can't even get outside, if you're in a wheelchair listening to this, if you're incapacitated listening to this, science has now been able to show that if you just look on a computer or an iPad at greenery, at nature, at beauty, like you can listen to Pavarotti from your home, you can also look at nature from your home, and that still washes over your parasympathetic nervous system, somewhat like meditation and mala beads. And so no matter your situation at the present, while you're listening to this, there is always a step to take to add to your resilience and your soul's reservoir.
Yeah. Very important to be aware of what you need. Your body gives signals. Your body and your mind are giving signals all the time. And if we're not afraid to listen to what they're telling us, I think sometimes that's what happens. People are afraid to discover how vulnerable they really are, or how much they're in need of something they don't have. And there's a kind of, what would we say, an embarrassment or a humiliation or a sense of unworthiness that comes out of that. And rather than misjudging it in that way, see it through the lens of, this is my parasympathetic system, or it's my mind, it's my body, telling me that something is missing that I need to attend to. Those are very healthy signs. It's like a fever. A fever is the body trying to purge itself of some kind of an infection. So rather than seeing it as a criticism, a put down of ourselves, see these as the universe sending us signals that you might want to think about going to a garden. You might want to think about listening to some music. You might want to think about just calling a friend. When was the last time you just picked up the phone and called someone to say, hey, I've been thinking about you, and how have you been? I can't tell you how quickly, if I'm in a down mood, how quickly that gets reversed if I simply give my attention to somebody else. Call someone and let them know I've been thinking about them. Boy, that's a gift. My mom passed away a few months ago. She was 95.
Sorry for your loss.
But she was also like that, could hardly get out of bed toward the end. But she was smart enough to know, first of all, just to call me. We were like two magpies. We'd be talking all the time to each other. And we'd be speaking about the most amazing range of topics. She remembered a performance of Aida that she and I had attended at Lincoln Center 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And she was analyzing it and saying, what made that so wonderful was not just the voices, which were so spectacular, but the choreography and the sets and the lighting and the drama. And, it's as though she took the tools that she had and went within that to optimize their value. You know, a story comes to mind of the late sculptor Henry Moore. When Henry Moore was just starting out in sculpting, he didn't have a lot of money. Sometimes he would go to a quarry, and instead of getting the stone that he wanted for some idea that he had in his mind, he bought whatever his few dollars could purchase. And he would bring that smaller stone home and then just look at it and think about it. And from that meditation, a new idea would emerge that would sometimes surpass what he had had originally from that more expensive stone. I think we humans have that resource. We have an ability to optimize whatever tools we have at our disposal, however modest they may be. And what a great blessing that is.
Oh, I often think there should be a vitamin R that stands for resilience, because it doesn't mean bad things don't happen to you on a body, mind, spirit level, but it means that you can rebound or remake or reconstruct yourself in a better way more easily with less trauma to yourself, the more that you have these tools. I always refer to them as tools. Meditation is a tool. Even rewriting the script of that which has been to help that which is now is a tool. It's all about tools. Well, just for a second, going back to Siggi, I still am a little bit astonished that he helped fight the Nazis. He came to the United States. He had $250. Just could you tell me a few steps? It kind of boggles my mind since I don't have 1 billion rupees in the bank. So how did he get to that? A few steps of that, because it's really kind of mind-boggling.
He graduated from cleaning toilets to selling neckties.
Uh-huh.
And with a little bit of commissions he earned off from selling neckties, he started buying penny stocks. He would read the papers and just kind of educate himself about how the stock market worked. And he found a company that struck him as having potential. But as he read about them and he asked for an annual report and so on, he saw that they were being guided by a kind of sleepy, fuddy-duddy, over-the-hill kind of board of directors, older men who really didn't have the impetus or the desire to grow the company any more than it already was. Very passive. He happened to meet someone who had more shares in that oil company than he was able to buy. And this older, more experienced investor said to him, you strike me as the kind of young man who could lead a takeover of this company. If I guide you, are you interested? Well, here's Siggi realizing that he has an opportunity to go from commissions from selling neckties to possibly taking over an oil and gas company in Texas. He jumps on the opportunity. And of course, he didn't have enough money himself to take over the company. So we get all his friends and neighbors and everybody to pitch in, and you buy a few shares and you buy a few shares and I'll buy a few shares. He puts together this little coalition of shareholders, and sure enough, ends up with 17% of the company stock, enough for him to get on the plane, fly to the city where the board of directors met, walk into the room and say, "Gentlemen," and from then on, the floor was his. Someone described him once as having Shakespearean vocal skills, that he would just bowl people over, with his rhetoric. And he was a teller of his tales were so tall that normal tall tales were short by comparison.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, he would. You're
not saying he's like embellishing it so it wasn't really true.
Oh my gosh, lies upon lies. Let me give you an example. If you wanted to
lie yourself to success, huh?
Once he had this bank, after the oil company, he got a bank, Trust Company of New Jersey. And he built his bank one customer at a time. So we'd go visit a potential customer, okay? And he sees that on the wall, this person has photos of his son in a swim meet. Siggi would turn to him and say, "Oh, I see your son's a swimmer. I wasn't much of a swimmer, but when I was in Harvard, I was a gold medal diver." Like I say, really, you went to Harvard and you were a diver? He said, yeah, my specialty was the triple backflip, whatever. And the man said, gosh,
The world being so transparent today, I'm not sure that these steps for evolution would work today.
and he said, you went to Harvard. He said, well, I did graduate work at Harvard. First, I went to Cambridge in England. Then I transferred to Oxford. Then I came here and went to Yale for a few years. And then I did graduate work at Harvard. That's when I was on the dive.
So what do you think about that? That part of his stepping stone were like telling these tall tales. What do you think about that?
It was all in with the best of intentions. And he always revealed afterwards, once this potential customer was completely overwhelmed with this guy, so he would say, there were no swimming pools in Auschwitz. Auschwitz, you were in Auschwitz. Roll up the sleeve, show the prisoner number. And now he can get into saying what he wanted to say, which was to educate this man about what had happened to the Jewish people, how God had given him this chance at a new life, and how he was now here, not only for his own betterment and that of his own family, but for this person and his family as well. And if he would trust him with his resources, his money, his deposits, he would treat that as though it were his own money and his own family's resources. And he built his bank like that to the point where it became, I think, the third largest commercial bank in the state of New Jersey.
Boy, you know, all the spiritual leaders always say one of the biggest messages is to treat everybody else, all your neighbors, as you would yourself. But when we're so filled with anger, it's hard to transmute that into opportunities. Anger kind of blocks opportunities. So do you have any messages from his story and from all the amazing biographies that you have delved into other people's lives and the path of their lives? Do you have any messages of transmuting anger into opportunity?
That's a very, very good point. I did a biography of George Harrison called Here Comes the Sun. George, when he was a younger fellow, when the Beatles were just starting out, also had that tendency to be very angry, bitter about people impinging on his privacy and so on. Later, George, who I had the pleasure of studying yoga with him when I was a teenager, in my late teens, realized that anger was a toxic condition, and he didn't want that in his life. Something as simple as breathing can be a great way of allowing the body to reset itself. You know, the breathing or pranayama practice in yoga is central. Very often in yoga classes, we'll say, let the breathing guide the asanas. You know, let your breathing be...
The asanas are the positions, the yoga
physical
positions.
Postures,
right.
Correct. Sometimes just taking a deep breath, and I would tell my students also, if you're going into an exam or some difficult task that you have, just take a moment, sit back, and do a minute or two of deep breathing. Let your metabolic system calm down. Allow that additional oxygen to make its way through your bloodstream to the brain. And once that additional oxygen gets to the brain, all kinds of exciting, wonderful things can happen. You know, we have this pharmacy up here in our heads, and oxygen can trigger the production and release of endorphins and dopamines and all kinds of other very healthy biochemicals.
I love that. The pharmacy in your head. I love that. So it's also one of the reasons that exercise, even short little stints of high interval bursts, it increases your oxygen circulation, and then it boosts what we've just heard you lovingly refer to, or accurately refer to, as the pharmacy in your head. You've got your own pharmacy that you can turn on.
You know, Lindsay, if we do this again, you and I are going to be walking. We're going to be out. Let somebody put a microphone between us. And we're just going to walk through some gardens, walk through some fields somewhere, because there's something so edifying about that, so stimulating about that. So that's a very simple trick, if you will, or device. Just breathing is one way of allowing those toxic
awareness to the breathing, though, right? You have to drive your awareness to the breathing.
Certainly. Mindful breathing is better than mindless breathing, certainly. For myself, in order to get there, I use mantras. I figure as long as I'm breathing, let me chant some sacred sounds. So, I'll chant different
So do you have a teacher, a spiritual teacher in particular?
I do. He passed away back in 1977. His name was Bhaktivedanta Swami. He was known to his students by the honorific title Prabhupada, or the master who teaches other masters. And from him, I learned bhakti, or devotional yoga. Siggi wasn't big on yoga, but he had his own way of keeping physically fit. First of all, he was constantly moving. You would not see him sitting down. Even when he was in his office, he was pacing back and forth. His secretaries had to run behind him holding the phone lines over his head so they wouldn't sweep papers off his desk. He'd be on the phone talking to people running a mile a minute. So he had his own kind of anaerobic routines, if you will, just by being always active in his office.
I love that. So just by the way, I don't know if you know, but I lived with Swami Satchidananda for many years in his ashram. That's why my first name, my spiritual name, is Devaki. So I don't think that you knew that. But
well, you and I need to have a longer conversation. I was privileged to be asked to do a documentary about Gurudev called Living Yoga, and I'll send you a copy of it.
I would love that. My editor, who has edited my last 10 books out of 20 plus, Parvati.
I know Parvati.
You know Parvati?
She's terrific. Say hi from Yogeshwara.
So, of course, she's a disciple of Neem Karoli Baba, as Baba Ramdas was, who was also one of my teachers. He was a Harvard professor, also known as, why am I, I'm forgetting his.
Ramdas?
Ramdas's English name was, can't think of it right at the moment. I'm focused on you, so my brain went away from that moment. But it's so funny. Parvati has been in my life now for more than 10 years, and I keep seeing. So I discovered that my very best friend, who has taught me unconditional love. You have to find somebody, I think, in your life, and it's often not even in your own.
Yeah.
And if you have someone like that in your life that teaches you unconditional love, it's a game changer. Well, it turns out that her brother, who I originally dated, that said, we didn't work out, but you should meet my sister. And we all became lifelong, as Kurt Vonnegut would call it, a karas. It turns out that he has been best friends with Parvati's brother all this time, and I never knew it. So here's another, boy, you intertwine with the spiritual karas. That's all I've got to say. So you're part of my spirit. We're supposed to know each other more after this talk.
The last time I saw Parvati was in Santa Fe.
Well, that's where we both met. We both lived in Santa Fe.
And of course, Richard Alpert, that's Ramdas, has passed away now.
Right, a year and a half
I think
ago,
at the time, some mutual friends were doing a documentary about him called Fierce Grit.
Oh, right. Fierce Grit. He's the author of Be Here Now, by the way, which I think has sold more copies than almost, it's like up there with the Bible.
An important book for a lot of people, especially from our generation.
Right. Well, so this has been really wonderful. Not only have you written many wonderful books, this book itself, Unstoppable, one of my favorite terms, which I do think everyone should get. And now I'm going to go get that biography by you on Harrison, because I remember, so you were going to say that about how he transmuted that anger. I just want to go back to that a second, because that is really that's a real, a grisly point for many of us today, is we acknowledge all the wrongs that have been done, and we get filled with anger. So how did he transmute that anger to make it room for all that wonderful success and creativity that he then got to live?
Okay, this is a little tricky. I think we have to make a distinction here, Lindsay, between the kind of righteous anger triggered by seeing others doing violence to others, which was certainly the case for those who went through the Holocaust experience. That's not the kind of anger that you want to repress. That's an energy that can be put to good use. For example, in the aftermath of the war, my particular focus is on the war crimes trials that took place at Nuremberg and Dachau and elsewhere. So that's one kind of direction where anger can be channeled for righteous purposes. The other kind of anger, which is an anger that is that can shorten your duration of life, and that is harmful. is very often a reaction that we have to something that unconsciously is a part of us that we're reacting to. We see a quality in someone else that reminds us of something that we don't like about ourselves. And so we get angry about it. So in that sense, anger can be a defense mechanism against acknowledging something that deserves attention within us. That takes some introspection. That takes some willingness to look at yourself and say, what is it that I'm doing that could be done better? What do I need to attend to? In Buddhism, it's called the Buddha nature. That if there's something in you that I'm responding to, it's a part of me that's in you. And I need to figure out what that is. So a good way of initially handling anger when it happens is to step back and say, okay, what's really going on here? These are self-reflective skills, which Siggi had in spades. He knew himself well enough to know, I don't know about this. Let me find someone else who's more expert in this. He surrounded himself with the very best people in every field, whether it was legal advice, financial advice, oil and gas prospecting advice, whatever he needed. He went and got the very best experts he could find.
That is a great point to remember, that the people you surround yourself with have a lot to do with the vision through which you see your world life events and the tools with which you can optimize or not these events. So it's very important to shows like this where we have access to agile thinkers, also who you have in your closest realm makes a huge difference. And as you move through your life, you can note and listen and look and see, that's someone I want to know. That's someone who seems quite extraordinary, and take some steps to make that connection happen. Or even just a neighbor who is a gentle soul. You have control over those that you let in, and they have influence as to how you see your tomorrow.
Yeah. In Sanskrit, there's a word, sangha. Sangha means good company. Be careful the kind of sangha that you invite into your life. There's a saying in French, tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. We are a reflection of our environment. We're a reflection of many things. We're a reflection of our upbringing, the kind of parents we had. We're a reflection of our physical environment, the quality of air, the quality of food, and so on. We're also a reflection of the company we keep. And one very important foundational guideline in spiritual practice is to always keep good company and stay away from the kind of company that can lead you down the wrong path. That guided Siggi Wilzig in his career. I've tried to emulate that. I've tried to follow that principle myself. I'm blessed. I've got wonderful family and wonderful friends.
That's wonderful. And don't forget, you can always have family of choice, those that you choose to be close, because sometimes for our health, we have to move away from our family. You never know what your own situation shows up, but there's always a way to reframe it. It might take some time. It might take some hurts, but you can reframe. And sometimes you can choose your family of choice. Make it your spiritual family, make it your sangha. I love that we used to, in the ashram, have satsang, which is a gathering, sat meaning truth, sat to a gathering of people, of good people, to try and understand and create more truth and embrace the truth. I love that you wrote the book too on Harrison, because that was one of when the Beatles came back from visiting with the Maharishi in India, it was like a light bulb over my head. And I said, that's it, I'm going to go to India. And I lived in India for a year after that, trying to understand satsang. What is the truth of it all? What is it all about? And conversations like we're having with you today, looking at other people's lives that went from rags to riches, and looking at ways that we can emerge out of this pandemic with more hope, more strength. That's what it's all about. So I want to thank you for being on the show today. And maybe we'll now have good company between us, or extend this. Is one of the things that really strikes me, Joshua, about talking with you is that you can feel when someone has been a lifelong meditator or someone who has developed some skills where they're present or congruent with themselves, body, mind, and spirit. And talking to you, you're very, very present. So you are living that which you are investigating and doing. You're really, you can feel it. Now, when you have a time to talk to somebody on the show, it's not like you totally know them, but you get a sense. And not everybody has occupied all these molecules in their bodysuit like you are striving and achieving to do. So thank you for all your work. I can feel it and I appreciate it.
Gracious.
I feel it. I really do. I love it. It's an honor to speak with someone who's so congruent. It makes me, even for this moment of time we've had together, I'm feeling a bit rejuvenated. So I mean that. I'm not just saying that. I really do mean that. Now I know you know Parvati too. She emailed me this morning and I'm going to email her tonight and say, oh my gosh.
Well, hi from me.
Joshua says hi. So thank you for being on the show. Take a look at his book, Unstoppable. And also, this is Joshua Greene, Greene. He also has some other incredible biographies. When I was a young girl, biographies were my favorite books because you learn so much from others. And we can learn from Joshua's point of view that hope has a larger font size. Tools with which to pull that off are what this show is all about. If you love the smart plus heart aspects that you've just gotten from this conversation, don't forget you can go to drlindseyberkson.com/membership. And we've created this community that's such a beautiful mixture of physicians, nurse practitioners, smart patients, where we delve into the science every single day, but we are always acknowledging the soul and the spirit of each other, just as Joshua has shown us in his own life and in his works. So thanks again, Joshua. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Bye-bye.